Hi, everybody. Welcome to CANNAfact Friday. This is episode 14. I cannot believe we survived another work week. This was a stressful one. I was sick half the week, but now I'm getting better, and I'm so happy to be here with all of you. If you're joining us for the first time, this is CANNAfact Friday. It's a weekly live show on LinkedIn Live. We share stats and data related to the cannabis industry. And then David, my co-host, and I provide some context about what it might mean. And we topics. So I want to introduce you to my co-host, David Palaschuk, who is the author of the first book, Cannabis Branding, called Branding Bud, the Commercialization of Cannabis. The other half of the iconic CANNAfact Friday duo. Hi, David. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Adriana?
I'm pumped up, man. I'm pumped up.
That's awesome. I can't believe that we've made it to another CANNAfact Friday. I can't believe we're on our 14th episode, which is pretty amazing. It's great to be, and we're stoked that all the folks keep coming back. So thank you.
Hey, Nikki, welcome back. She said she just got your book today. Nice.
Awesome. Right on. Thank you, Nikki. It's going around. Kind of like, well, not like COVID, but it's going around. Anyway, I'm thrilled to be here today with you, Adriana, and our guest, Alexi, which we'll introduce in a moment. You know, for those of you that don't know, Adriana is the VP of Strategy at ISA, and she comes from the world of research and insights, and she helps her clients basically contextualize the data that comes in and connect the dots and make actionable strategies around them. And we come together in the cannabis space to do that. And what we do every week is bring somebody in, an expert, a subject matter expert. We talk about different aspects and things that are going on. And instead of just taking those quick sound bites, we try to add a few up and contextualize what's going on in the marketplace, because it is a crazy, fast cannabis space that we live in. So we're excited.
Thanks for adding that, David. I totally forgot to introduce myself.
You just said you're part or half of the dynamic duo, so I figured
where's the other half?
Right? Anyway, that said, we're excited to be here today. You know, we've got a great guest, Alexi, and most importantly, we've got the folks listening in. So as part of this, always, we ask everybody to chime in on the chat, and I almost lost myself there. Chime in and on the chat on the right-hand side of your screen and ask us questions. Give us your opinions, give us your thoughts, and participate. That's what it's all about.
Cool. Let's bring Alexi out here. For those of you who don't know Alexi Chaltas, he is the CEO and co-founder of Wonder, which is an innovative cannabis-infused beverage brand with unique cannabinoid profiles, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about what he's up to over at Wonder and share some of his customer personas, which I'm very excited to talk about. Welcome, Alexi.
Hi. Hello, both of you. I'm equally excited that it's Friday. Made it to another Friday.
We survived.
Yes, definitely. The weeks go by quick, but they feel long once you get to Friday.
Yeah, I know exactly that feeling. So how do you feel? You want to kick it off? You want to jump into a stat?
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it.
All right, let's kick it off. Let's throw a slide up there. So if you're just joining us and you are not familiar with the format, we like to do a little guessing game where we throw up a stat, a piece of data, typically from a survey or a poll that we do of cannabis consumers, and then we have the audience guess if it's a CANNAfact or a CANNAfiction. So this next one we're going to show you is from a poll that we conducted in 2019, actually. This is a little bit older one. We polled 1,000 consumers in May of 2019, and we asked the question, how do you feel about people consuming cannabis when there are children around? They had 5 answer choices. They could either say that they're perfectly fine with it, or they could say they're neutral, or they could say they're completely against it. It was a 5-point scale. So I want to hear from the audience. If you want to drop your guesses in the chat, take a guess if this is CANNAfact or CANNAfiction, that 17% of cannabis consumers feel perfectly fine about people consuming cannabis near children, and 29% are completely against it. What do you think? CANNAfact or CANNAfiction? We did a pretty good job stumping the audience last time. Let's see if we get lucky again this time.
And Alexi, you're perhaps up first. What do you think about this?
I'm definitely CANNAfact. I'm definitely CANNAfact.
We have a couple more guesses in the chat. Eric guesses CANNAfact. We have Lara Fortis, who says regardless of form factor. That's right. We didn't specify a form factor. We just said, how do you feel about it in general?
Touche, Fortis.
Charlene Estrada guessed fact. We have Nikki Lawley guessed CANNAfiction. Okay, we have one dissenting opinion that it's CANNAfiction. Looks like everybody else is guessing fact. Hey, Sarah, thanks for joining.
I think that's a good observation. Depends on if it's smoking product.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I was going. There's always another metric, right? There's always something else that you can add on. But
always a layer.
I would say that's the most important thing. And I think that also speaks culturally to where we are, right? You know, if it's a beverage, it's a lot easier than if it's something we're smoking or vaping in front of kids.
Yeah. It was actually one of the first things that we pulled when we were polling people in California when we were thinking about doing beverages, which was how socially acceptable do you think cannabis consumption is across different formats? And so while it's not one-to-one with, around children, beverage was by far the most socially perceived as the most socially acceptable way to consume.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Anybody else want to take a guess before we reveal the answer? CANNAfact or CANNAfiction? Looks like most folks are saying they agree that it's a CANNAfact. All right, let's reveal the answer.
Let's see.
It is a CANNAfact. We were not successful in stumping you. This was a true one. This was 17% said perfectly fine. 29% said completely against it.
Yeah.
What do you think, Alexi? Anything surprising about that to you?
No, not really. I mean, I think, I think just around children, I think that it's always going to be, I feel like, a polarizing reaction, right? Just whether it's cannabis or whether it's anything, right? Like I'm curious what alcohol would look like, right? Because while alcohol is so ubiquitous and so consumed everywhere, I wonder what the polarization is, because I'm sure that there's still some people that are, strongly against consuming alcohol, right? But I think if you changed it to say, a Coors Light or a Miller Light, like, one Coors Light or a Miller Light, you might get a very different answer, right? So it feels so nuanced because it is so special, right? Like your kids, children, they're so precious, they're so vulnerable that I think that context is probably really important.
Mm-hmm.
If you told somebody like, hey, if you microdose some cannabis, right, like it would change people's perception. Like, sipped on some cannabis.
Yeah. Yeah, context is everything, of course. I think really this poll was like, it was very basic, and just to get like that initial gut reaction, right? They're answering quickly. So like, how do you feel? Like, what's your gut emotional reaction to that scenario?
Right.
What they came up with. Probably different now too. So we'll have to run it again and let you know what the results are if it's changed.
Yeah.
But awesome. What's interesting about this is that it almost begs the question, right? Which is that initial reaction, how people still feel about cannabis, where I think if they double clicked and said, hold on, what form factor is it? That is really showing, I guess, how in tune people are with the normalization of cannabis and the other form factors available. Some people still think cannabis is only smoking it. But it's interesting. I'd also like to throw out, a quick question. Let's see. I mean, beverages have always had a place in society, no matter what, and, and that's everywhere from hierarchy, to gender. I remember getting my first Shirley Temple at a bar because I wasn't old enough, barely even old enough to be in the bar. But or even the form factors they come in, like a juice box is obviously for a kid, or a pouch is obviously for a kid. How do those built-in societal understanding of beverages play into cannabis, and how could a cannabis brand leverage those aspects of it, to kind of get around these sticky questions like we just got into?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that the way that a cannabis brand could use the form factor is it's really and particularly to get around the stigma is, I think normalization is not going to be the responsibility of just, one form factor or one person, right? Like that takes everybody, every day, conversation, understanding, knowing, seeing somebody you wouldn't expect, and all of a sudden they're consuming, right? And understanding about that. Like that's how movements evolve, right? It starts with, the early adopters, the earliest adopters, and continues to evolve until you get to, call it normalization, mass adoption, whatever you want to call it. And I think that where brands can benefit the most, I think, with beverages is, especially within the cannabis category, when if I smoke flower, right, like nobody sees what is it that I'm smoking. Like a connoisseur or somebody who's, in tune might say like, oh, well, what strain are you smoking? Like what is that? What product is that, right? But you'd have to really like kind of ask, and that's really only like cannabis to cannabis. But if I'm drinking something, I think the expression that I've used before, and it may have been with you, Adriana, so I apologize, but you're literally a walking billboard of that product when you're consuming, right? And I think that just it's so powerful. Like I had a moment where I was socially consuming in a group, and people were drinking beverages, and just seeing people with wonder in their hand in the can, like it was just a moment where I had to kind of sit back and like, first just kind of recognize like, wow, how special is that as somebody who created something, but then two, also just recognizing that every person that has a wonder in their hand is making a statement about their belief on what they want to drink at that moment, right? And that there is more choice aside from alcohol. And so to answer your question, I just think that, whether it's for a brand that's looking to maximize awareness and impressions, I think that beverages is a format that is in its own class around that, because it is a consumption experience that just doesn't happen in 2 seconds, and it's one that's branded, as long as the can is in someone's hand. Mm-hmm. I think anybody that's seen a White Claw in a bar can understand that, right? Or the beer with the beer mug, that's the Guinness mug, that's particular to that type of beer. Like those are all branding moments that I think is unique to beverages.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like you're standing there, you're holding it in your hand, people are seeing you with it. It's almost like there's a performative aspect to it when you're choosing a certain beverage. It like, this says something about me as a consumer because I've chosen it. As we were talking, actually, my someone on my team, Alexandra, dropped a couple of stats in our chat, because we actually did ask a question about alcohol that you brought up, Alexi. So I'm going to read you what she sent me. In the same poll, so 1,000 cannabis consumers from 2019, we asked, how do you feel about people consuming alcohol around children? 12% are perfectly fine with it, and 28% are completely against it. That's pretty interesting. This is similar. And then we asked about smoking cigarettes. 5% are perfectly fine with it, and 54% are completely against it.
Yeah.
The biggest demon is cigarettes, which, yeah, I kind of agree with that.
Makes sense with secondhand smoke, right? Like it's literally something that is affecting everybody else, and it doesn't need to put down to the form factor or someone's choice, because everyone has their own reason, but the impact that it has on people around them, right? I think that's where you've seen the decline of combustible of cigarettes over the last 30 years.
And also too, here I say, even though I'm a consumer of flower and inhalation, which is a better way of saying it. You know, the demon is really smoking, right? Cigarettes is sort of like another conversation, but I think smoking is a dirty word, even when it comes to cannabis. And you know, I think over time, as it normalizes, as the canna curious come in, I definitely think they're going to come in through other form factors. And in particular, Alexi, there are different types of sessioning, you know, in particular when it comes to beverages. And I know you have, you know, a lower dose product and a higher dose product, you know, to address that. Would you just talk quickly about that?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think like going back to, you know, kind of the idea of beverages, right? There, like if you look at the beverage category, you know, before cannabis, right? Before cannabis beverages, I just think it's really obvious, but it's also just interesting to kind of observe and acknowledge that there's a different beverage for different occasions, and they say different things about the moment. So if I'm having a glass of wine with dinner, that's very different than, you know, if I'm at a happy hour having a cocktail, or like, let me say, if I'm at a happy hour having a cocktail, that's very different than if I'm having a light beer, right? If I'm having a Manhattan, that tells you something very different about who I am and where I'm at that moment, right?
Right,
Which is
either a
also
really good day or a really bad day.
exactly right, and it's also very different than if I'm like, we're gonna do a shot of tequila, like, you know, get a lime. And so it's interesting because it's all alcohol, right? But it's how it's presented, packaged, consumed, and kind of the intensity as well.
Mm-hmm.
And with cannabis, and that's not quite the analogy that I look at with our beverages. Where I look at with our beverages is that cannabis has just a whole wide range of consumers, and the most avid cannabis consumers really enjoy beverages as well. And whether they're combining it with smoking, whether they're sipping and smoking, you know, that's a thing that we've picked up from consumers, or whether they just want to drink a cannabis beverage instead of a glass of alcohol. But with some of the most avid cannabis consumers, they just tend to have a higher tolerance because they've been using. And so it's no different than a 3 or a 4% beer versus a triple IPA, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I couldn't have 2 triple IPAs or maybe even one, but I don't look at somebody who has a triple IPA and say like, oh, like I can't believe you're having that, right? So it's just when we think about beverages, we think about how do we it's a category. How do we serve as many people who are interested in beverages, which our thesis is like everybody's interested in beverages because everybody knows how to drink. It's not the same stigma as smoking. And so how do we serve as many consumers in that way? Because while we are building a movement and then we are moving towards alcohol alternatives, it just doesn't only apply to people who do not consume cannabis. It applies to people who consume cannabis as well. They're actually the first people to this movement because many of them, you know, consume cannabis instead of alcohol. And at the same time, many of them consume cannabis and alcohol together. And so, you know, it's a beverage can live in all of those places. And I think that's what's really exciting about it. So that's why we've thought about you know, different doses and different formats.
I love that this is something that's on your radar. And this is something also that David and I have talked about, and we've done studies about this too, which when I first was sort of looking into the beverage category, I just found that so interesting that a lot of the marketing that we were seeing was focused on replacing alcohol or an alternative to alcohol. But when you look at what consumers are actually doing, it's not typically, 40% of the time, it's also in combination with alcohol. But there are some times when it makes sense to have both. There's sometimes when it makes sense to have one or the other. I think like just generally, we're starting moving away from this binary way of looking at any type of consumption. Either you're completely 100% healthy or you're completely 100% off the wagon, right? There's a broad spectrum of experiences within that. And I think we're now starting to be more open to that idea. Alexi, if you don't
it's crazy. Just off of that, like it's crazy because I you know, we as within the industry, or you know, or operators within the industry might be thinking about it as like recognizing that they happen together. You know, I recognize that pretty early, just kind of really zeroing into that because we think about trying to reduce alcohol consumption, and really it's actually not about reducing alcohol consumption. It's about choice and letting people be who they are and what works for them. And before cannabis legalization and the state by state legalization, people didn't have as much choice because they were told that they can't have it. And now with cannabis beverages, what we view it as is that people have a choice of what they want to drink. And for us, that looks like three different categories. You have cannabis, you have alcoholic beverages, you have non-alcoholic, and then you have cannabis beverages. And you can choose any one or three of those along, in the same occasion to have and to optimize and to have a great experience. And without that choice, without the alcoholic beverage, non-alcoholic beverages, it was always just alcohol. But now, you go into a bar and they have non-alcoholic choices. You go into a restaurant, they have non-alcoholic choices. So the movement is happening.
I love that. I wanted to get into talking about the progressive parent.
Yeah.
This is so interesting to me, Alexi, when you were telling me about how you developed these personas, these customer personas. One of them is the progressive parent. Well, first of all, I so appreciate that this is conceived of as the parent, because I think sometimes people get really focused on conversations about parenthood and they talk just about the mom and they exclude the dad. So this is coming from a person who was raised by a single father. So I really appreciate the more inclusive way of looking at it. So I'd love to hear more about sort of your persona and how you conceived of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think as somebody who has 3 kids, it was definitely somewhere that was very near and dear to me, right? And very close. It was also something where, as somebody who around the same time that I started drinking, used cannabis and used that very socially, and then stopped kind of using cannabis as it just didn't fit my life, especially smoking, right? And social circles were different, and stigmas were different, and the method didn't really work, right? And so, so for me, the beverage factor was a way in which I could get what cannabis was about for me, which, it can be different things at different times, but where I enjoy it the most is socially, or where I enjoy it the most is to relax and to have a moment for myself. And so beverages for me was a factor in a way in which I could do that around my family. And I think that's, the progressive parent, I think, appreciates all of that, but also appreciates, and frankly just needs a moment of control and a moment for themselves, right? As a parent, as a parent, your living room can be a mess like mine right now. I step on toys and kind of get the sharp object in my foot. Your kid could just decide that they don't want to get dressed, and it's just like, what do you do? And you don't have what everybody, I think, seeks a lot of, which is control in their life. And so kids is really a way of shifting your perspective. It forces you to shift your perspective on letting go, and sometimes you forget to let go and you get really upset. But I think that is, everyone has their work, and whether that's working at home as a full-time parent, or whether that's after a different job and coming home and being a parent, it's not until you need that moment for yourself. And I think that cannabis beverages can be a way to give that person a moment for themselves in something that, again, is a different choice than alcohol. And I think what parents appreciate, or what this persona appreciates, is that if I, continue and maybe have a couple more drinks than I was planning, the next day, I really feel that. And that's a factor of age. It's probably a factor of sleep, and it's probably, and it just gets old, right? My kids this morning, both of them, my youngest figured out how to climb out of the crib. So 6:30 was our wake up call today, and I'm usually awake-ish by that time, but it used to be 7, and now it's 6:30 because our youngest decides when it is. And if I had too many drinks, then that becomes a little bit more painful. And so I think that the progressive parent is appreciates just that extra choice in the beverage.
I love that. Adorable alarm clocks.
I went to bed early, so I felt great. I was happy to see them.
And the one thing every parent can relate to is stepping on a Lego brick. That's for sure. That's the most painful thing in the world, is stepping on a Lego
Yeah.
brick.
We
heard it here
were
first.
just debating whether they were going in the trash.
Lego stepping. There's a cannabis beverage.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So this leads in perfectly to our next stat, which I want to throw up here and start having people take a look and putting their guesses in. This is a question that we asked of, let me look at my notes here, 420 consumers of cannabis. We fielded this March 16th, 2022, so just last month. We asked them why they consume cannabis beverages. So you had to be a consumer of a cannabis beverage from the past 3 months to answer this question. And then what we did is we split it by people who have children under 18 in the home and people who do not have children under 18 living with them, to see if there was a difference in what people were choosing. So let's take a guess. We picked out one of the attributes, which was energy and focus. Take a guess if you think that parents with kids under 18 are more likely to say they consume infused beverages to help with energy and focus compared to consumers without kids in the home. What do you all think? Let's see if we can stump them this time. Ooh, Eric Gustafson guessed CANNAfiction. Welcome back, Eric. Thank you for joining us.
He's fast on the trigger.
He is. Yeah, he must have high-speed internet over there.
That's right. I don't know.
I'll go with fiction as well.
Fiction. Okay, we got 2 fiction.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, we're not asking anybody form this in the phrase of a question, so we'll take CANNAfact or CANNAfiction.
What is CANNAfiction?
It's good.
All right, it looks like we have a pretty strong consensus. People are not buying it that people with kids are more likely
want more energy. I can see that point, but
all right, a lot of
Okay,
guesses.
fact.
Nicole Minori gets fiction. Vanessa Aguirre guesses fact. Sam Burton, yes, fiction. Let's see. Charlene, guess fiction. Thanks for guessing, everybody. Should we reveal the answer, or should we let some more guesses roll in? What do you think?
I say reveal. Oh, okay. Our guest wants to keep going.
Let's keep going. I want to know. The suspense is killing me.
Yeah. All right. This is what I was saying. It's CANNAfact or CANNAfiction. The answer is?
It's CANNAfact. Ooh, I stumped you this time. This is interesting, right? So we split it with children, without children. We looked at, specifically under 18 living in their home. And we looked at all these different attributes, the reasons why they could consume, or they could choose more than one reason. And the people who have children in the home said that they were much more likely to pursue the energy and focus situation, which I think that might play into what you were saying, Alexi, about how if you're drinking alcohol and you have to get up at 6:30 in the morning because your kid needs help getting out of the crib, then they would be like, oh gosh, I wish I would have had a cannabis beverage instead, and I would have a little more energy right now to deal with this.
Oh, I see. Interesting. So you think that it's actually people thinking about how they're going to feel after, so that they want to have energy kind of the next day, maybe?
It might be. I think there could be a variety of factors here. It could be that they're comparing it to how they feel when they drink, or they're comparing it to how they feel when they smoke cannabis, maybe. It could be like a different feeling that they get from it, or that they're just able to consume less. I don't know. I think there could be a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
What's interesting too is, as a parent and somebody that's always multitasking, right? It's just hard to get stuff done. So the more energy I have across the board, I'd gratefully take it. But the thing that intrigues me about this too is to get high. So with children, it's 24%. Without children, it's 36%. And dare I say, as a parent, even admitting, like I'm doing this to get high, almost seems somewhat irresponsible. And so I wonder if it's that, as you have kids, you just need to think a little bit beyond your nose, so to speak, right? You need to be aware of the morning that's coming up and all the other things that we're talking about. So it's just interesting. I take a look at all these numbers and I start to see marketing opportunity and brand opportunity for different segments of beverage consumers.
This actually lines up a lot also with we did a similar type of thing. Again, not marketed towards people with children, I don't think. Although we did, I think, ask about people who had children. So I'll have to go back and look. But yeah, the anxiety and stress relaxing was definitely the highest one. And I think that, the energy and focus, while, second to that, it's still very, high up there. And I think that they're definitely, I mean, with different ingredients, different formulations, different cannabinoids, I think that there is an opportunity that's already evolving to provide, not just marketing and branding that have different use and different occasions, but actually like ingredients and product that has different occasions, which you're already seeing, I think, in the sleep section, right? That's I feel like that's just kind of taken off within the cannabis section.
So are there specific hooks to relate to, either to different benefit specific products or to different types of parents or different type of beverage consumers? How do you go about segmenting?
Yeah, I mean, I think segmenting is for us, it's been evolving, right? Like even our personas, right? Like that we've been in market for 6 quarters, right? So that's relatively new in cannabis world, and that's relatively new and how long I think that this movement is going to go on for. And so I just think that we're so early in beverages that we have to be careful about over-indexing on specific, like marketing to a specific consumer, because it's just we're trailblazing, right? And the last thing I want to do is make something smaller. And so what I find though, and for us when we think about personas, is we actually try to remember, and Dawn, who runs our brand marketing and marketing efforts, and she constantly kind of reminds me in a very positive way of, we don't think about them as fitting in as just a progressive parent. It's just a progressive parent, right? Like the other personas that we have, like we get really excited when they overlap. So are they a culture leader? Are they a canna enthusiast? Because when you get them overlapping with multiple of these, that's where it becomes really powerful in terms of who this customer is or who this person is, and how valuable they are, not only to us, but really to the movement, right? Because it's not just about us. Like the person who overlaps with canna enthusiast and progressive parent and drinks Wonder beverages, that person is sharing it with other people. That person is more likely to bring it to the barbecue or bring it to the kids' party and put it in the cooler next to the alcohol. So for us, from a marketing perspective, I think that the one thing that we tried to probably keep in mind in thinking about who we're speaking to is we try to be into kind of voice. We try to be approachable, and we want to be inclusive. Not just to be inclusive, but because also it's cannabis, right? And cannabis can be scary because it's unknown or it's new. And so being approachable and in that understanding our role to educate. So, educating is easy to say, it's expensive to do, right? Whether you're educating, if you're innovating and you have a new category, a new product, and your new brand, like there's a lot of education that has to happen across both, retail accounts and then also the end consumer. And so education is really important. And I think that's, extremely important for parents, kind of just coming back to that control piece, right? Like a parent doesn't want to have like an X factor of like, what's going to happen if I drink this, right? Like they're looking for the exact opposite. And so I think the other thing too is just, a little bit more maturity and trying to be, everything that comes with kind of who we are as people behind the brand, but also who we're speaking to. So, we think of ourselves as the brand is a little bit more adult. It's not as kind of young or it's just not as like kind of young. We try to be energetic or youthful, but not just a little bit more wiser, I think, in use of words and language and how we speak to the audience. And so I'd say that those are things that I think we feel like it resonates with the audience that we're trying to attract to, and really just being personable, being approachable and really being a little bit more adult.
You know, you just hit something for me, right? You know, hit the nail on the head, which is you talk about overlaps, and in my book I talk about the 14 cannabis brand archetypes, and the one thing that I say over and over and over again is there will be more than 14. There's just not 14. There's 14 that I've recognized, but even more importantly, they're not mutually exclusive, right? So you could have a free archetype with the health and wellness archetype, and they can come together. And you know, I often talk about Whoopi and Maya. Whoopi Goldberg is a celebrity. Their focus is women specific, so it's a gender archetype, and they've got a charity component to it too. And if you overlay those three archetypes, you get that brand. But that's the sweet spot. That's where you can start to really understand who you're talking to and what's of value to them. And people aren't that simple. The world isn't that simple, right? But
not so black and white, right?
That's right. That's right. But for me, you really you know hit the nail on the head when you explained it that way, and the overlapping of consumers and their needs.
Yeah.
Marketers in cannabis have such a hard job, don't they? They have to do overcome all these hurdles and obstacles, and then on top of that, there's like this undercurrent underneath everything of overcoming the stigma and overcoming or trying to work towards normalization.
Yeah. Yeah. And really in the modern day marketing world, really not even like we're in the Stone Age. Like we're relegated as cannabis companies to the Stone Age of marketing tools, right? You can't use Facebook, you can't use Instagram, you can't use Google, right? And so everything that's happened in the last 25 years in marketing and ad technology is not quite available to us.
You know, and at the same time, as we talk about the way people think about cannabis and you know, growing up and all the bad things people said about it, you know, just this past Super Bowl, you had Liquid Death, a water, but that ad was, you know, little kids drinking the water, but in a way that, and in a situation that adults would drink alcohol. So it's pretty, I mean, that's pretty edgy, and to see that on one side and to see us not be able to do other things in our world is, you know, is somewhat disappointing.
Yeah.
I haven't caught that. I'm gonna have to check that out. That sounds very strange.
So it's a bunch of kids listening to rock and roll partying, and they're drinking cans of Liquid Death, which looks like either, you know, a beer or a powder drink of some sorts, but in reality, it's water. It's water packaged up to look like that. So, you know, kids are already imitating adults in what they do, and now we have commercials of kids imitating adults in what they do. It just reinforces.
What a weird time when water is edgy and cannabis is approachable.
Indeed. Yeah.
Let's jump into our last slide, and it's not a guessing game, sorry audience, but we wanted to share some real quotes from real consumers related to the question, did you receive negative messages about cannabis when you were growing up? And I think this really ties in with our conversation about the progressive parent and about stigmas, like what you were told as a kid growing up potentially. Now parents today have to write a whole new script. They have to totally reinvent the way we talk about cannabis, and what their parents told them is not, you know, appropriate really to say anymore. So we have some quotes on here, and if it's a little small to read, I'm going to pull out one that I think is my favorite. This person told us that the messages they received from their family is that it's illegal not to smoke it, but then their parents smoked it on the low, which I think is a very common experience.
Yeah.
And how many kids were disappointed in their parents that that they hid it from them? Just a very quick story. I received a package from a cannabis beverage manufacturer not too long ago, and it was beautifully packaged, and I had left it on my dining room table, and I didn't even think about it. And my 12-year-old son came over and said, "What's that? That's really cool." And he started to look at it, and I was caught dead in my tracks, just because, oh my God, out on the table. And it was in a beautiful bottle. It looked like it was an alcohol product. But I would never, 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 and I could repeat never 5 more times, leave flour out on the table or any other form factor. So, it's interesting. And I felt I had failed by leaving that out on the table. So long story short, I'm relieved. I'm relieved today to hear about the progressive parent and to understand that not only there are more parents like me, dealing with some of these issues, but that there are brand owners like you, really addressing these things. So when we come back to this real feedback from real consumers and the things that we see written up here, hopefully we've moved beyond that. And as parents, we could do a better job, and as brand owners, we could do a better job, and as a society, we could sort of, help kids better understand what cannabis is, how it comes in different form factors, and be responsible about it. It's not for everybody, and for those that it is for, it's for 21 and above, right? So it's just really important, and I think the commentary here really reflects where we've been, and hopefully, we're moving.
Yeah.
We've come a long way.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a friend of an angel investor of ours, but then also just a friend and supporter, and she told me how she went over to her house, brought some wonder, and she even left some wonder for her, and she didn't know what to do. It was like, where am I going to hide this? And her friend was like, where am I going to hide this, because of her kids? And then what my friend told me is, she said that it was interesting for her because she had an alcohol bar cart, and so it was just this for me, that was just really. Actually, I was talking to her about parenthood, and I think this was last Mother's Day, so actually a year ago, and when we were just talking about this and how just, I think everybody deals with this in a different way, of how do you talk about cannabis, or how do you talk about these I don't know, just all the world, right? It's really about the world, right? I mean, we talk about, hey, it's cannabis, but really, even just what progressive people, or adults today, parents today, and how they think about what they speak about with their children is just on a different spectrum than probably parents before us, right? Like generations before us, of what they spoke to us about, whether that's all the hard topics, sex, drugs, money and finances, right? And to think, how better would we be as individuals, or how better would we be as society, if we were having more open dialogue around all of those topics? Because it's going to happen sooner or later, that you're going to have to figure it out, and why not be through your parents? And so, with our 12-year-old, we had to start figuring that out kind of early, just because relative to my cannabis journey, because she was inquisitive, and we didn't really want to hide anything, and it went from adult drinks, or adult products, and then to explaining the concept of drugs or medicines, and then vaping, because she saw an adult vaping at a kid's birthday party or somewhere that she was, and when she asked them what it was, they kind of just hid it, and were trying to make it go away. And so she asked me, and so I was like, okay, well, now I gotta explain what a vape is, how it works, what could be in the vape, different products, different drugs. And so I don't know. I've definitely, obviously, I'm probably on one end of the spectrum of trying to be very open about it, but I think that just hiding it is really just going to leave it to them to figure out when they're in college, or when they're on their own. And I've kind of always said, I feel just something is only as curious or interesting as we make it. And by hiding something, we make it, all of a sudden very, very interesting. And so, that's I definitely relate with you on the flower side, and in terms of what you'd leave out.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I mean, I too am at odds, you know, initially leaving that out. I felt I had failed. Looking back on it now, it created an opportunity to chat with my son about it. But at the same time, I have a bottle of wine, you know, sitting on my kitchen counter right now too. So, it goes.
Both made from plants.
Yes, exactly. That's the
Yeah.
place there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Complex
interesting.
topic to tackle for sure. Alexi, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your journey, like discovering your customers and figuring out how to like really get into their imagination and bring your product to life. And it's just been so fun chatting with you.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me. It's good chatting. I think we probably could have gone on for another hour about
Easily.
all these topics.
And those folks that are interested, you know, Alexi's product is called Wonder. Alexi, what's your website, just so we could?
Yeah, we'll drop a link in the chat.
Yeah, it's findwonder.com, or our Instagram is findwonder with a U, WUNDER.
Thank you so much.
All right, bye. Good seeing you both.
Bye.
Wow.
So cool. We're also going to drop in the chat a link to next week's episode. We are having a special guest, my colleague Anthony Michael from Material, who is going to share with us some of his mad scientist data analysis regarding 420. We're going to look at some social analytics, millions of online conversations about 420 and what they can reveal for us. Should be really interesting. So definitely click the link for next week and go ahead and hit that attend button so we can see you next time.
Yeah, we're excited. Another CANNAfact Friday has just gone by. Again, all the information is right here. Please sign up, join us every Friday. We look forward to seeing you. So take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and enjoy the weekend. We'll see you next Friday. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.